Welcome to the World Football Summit podcast, the show for football industry leaders who want to stay ahead of the game. We bring you the latest insights, trends, and stories from the experts driving innovation and progress in sports business worldwide. Join us as we dive deep into the ideas and initiatives transforming the world of football. From sustainability and innovation to player development, fan engagement, and everything in between. Our goal is to unite the global football industry and drive positive change and progress. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the World Football Summit podcast. I'm your host, Jaime, Director of Content and Communications at World Football Summit. Today, I'm more than happy to welcome Mike Rice, Operations Manager at AccessibAll, an organization that harnesses the power of sport to act as a driver for disability-inclusive change in wider society. Their mantra is total access. In fact, they were one of our partners in organizing the inclusive match between Atlético de Madrid and Lille during the Champions League match a few weeks ago. I wanted to bring Mike on to talk about the topic of accessibility in football. What does this mean? Well, what accessibility truly means, the misconceptions around it, stories and examples of organizations that are standing out, and overall, how can the entire ecosystem embrace accessibility as a priority? I believe the football we want and need is one that everyone can enjoy, regardless of the condition. So please stick around for this conversation. As a matter of fact, AccessibAll will be celebrating their international summit on 13th and 14th November at the Riyadh Air Metropolitano Stadium in Madrid. So make sure you check that out. And by the way, this conversation is brought to you by the UK's Great Campaign, which among other things is showcasing the UK's effort to drive positive change through sport. I mean, think about it. The UK is known to be home of football. It has one of the best football leagues in the world, and it is great to see how they are using this legacy to make a difference in people's lives. They will join us later in the conversation, but you can also find out more on greatcampaign.com. Again, that's greatcampaign.com. And before we kick off, a quick reminder, don't forget to subscribe and rate the podcast on your platform of choice. Share it with your industry colleagues. And if you want to stay ahead of the curve, subscribe to our newsletter, where every week you'll find trends, updates, everything that goes on at our events. All the links are in the show notes. Remember that World Football Summit Asia is taking place on December 2nd and 3rd in Riyadh. So check the details on our website and you're still in time to join us. And nothing else from my side. On to the episode with Mike Rice from AccessibAll. Well, Mike, it's a pleasure to welcome you to the World Football Summit podcast. Today we're going to talk about a topic that we're both passionate about, that I think is important to give visibility to, accessibility in football, so really looking forward to this. So welcome.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. We're delighted to be taking part in the podcast and working with yourselves.
Yeah, and we've already worked in the past with the Inclusive Match and other initiatives, and we look forward to your summit in just a few weeks. Actually, when this goes live, probably it's going to be next week. So anyway, Mike, before going into all the different topics that we want to discuss, I always like to ask my guests, to briefly introduce themselves, and more importantly, why is it that you do what you do?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, my name's Michael Rice. I'm the operations manager at AccessibAll. I've been with the organisation now for just over 13 years. Virtually all of my professional working career has been with this organisation. We were initially known as CAFE, the Centre for Access to Football in Europe, which some listeners may be more familiar with. We moved to the new brand of AccessibAll in June of this year, really to help us to focus on looking outside of the scope we have previously worked in, so looking beyond Europe and looking beyond football. Obviously still a huge key market for us is European football, but there's a big world out there who can really benefit from the experiences that we have now over this time as well. So as I say, I've been with the organisation for just over 13 of our 15 years. I was a law graduate at university, taking a particular interest in equality law. So I'm based in the UK, and my time at university coincided with the launch of the biggest to date legislation involving disabled people, which was the Equality Act in the UK, that really helped to enshrine the rights of disabled people, along with other protected characteristics as well. So I took a real key interest in that. Finishing university, I was looking at ways to stay in the sector, really. I also happen to be a huge football fan, and I'd spent around 18 months working in the youth academy for my football team as well. So anything I could do to really combine those two passions was key for me. And fortunately, this opportunity arose not long after I did graduate. I'm not disabled myself, but I do have a particular connection to the topic as well. So, as I mentioned, I'm a huge football fan. Used to go to the matches when I was a kid with my dad. When I was 11, my dad fell ill and for the next 10 or 11 months was disabled himself. So that stopped him at the time from being able to go to live matches. And I know that had a huge impact on him. We did manage to get into one more match again before we lost him. And I just remember the emotion that was in his eyes, being back in his stadium again and being able to be there alongside his fellow fans one more time. So it had a huge impact on him, and it's something that stayed with me from my childhood right through into my adult life. So it's something that I'm really proud to be able to help other disabled people to experience those moments now.
Wow. Mike, thanks so much for sharing that. It's a beautiful story. And I guess, it speaks a lot about your mission and your purpose, but not only from the accessible point of view, but also your point of view, which is, wow, super relevant. Didn't know that. So again, thanks for sharing that. And Mike, I guess I'm wondering, what was so you mentioned, no, at the beginning was cafe. I don't know the exact pronunciation. But what was the trigger? What was the moment that was decided to say, "Hey, we need to do this. We need to launch this initiative." So I'm curious about that.
Yeah, so there was an organisation based in the UK at the time called the National Association of Disabled Supporters. That organisation is now known as Level Playing Field, and they're a key partner of ours as well. We work closely with on a number of topics. And at the time, our founder on the cafe side, a lady called Joyce Cook, was the chair of Level Playing Field. She had been to a couple of major UEFA European tournaments and finals, most notably Euro 2004 in Portugal, and was feeding back her experiences to a contact that she'd made at UEFA at the time, and basically started to bang the drum effectively to say things need to improve. This is what's happening in the UK at the moment, and there was nothing really replicating that in Europe. So Joyce really took that mantle on herself, and for a number of years was making that case to UEFA to say, things have to get better than this. There was then an issue at the 2007 Champions League final in Athens between Liverpool and AC Milan, where a large number of disabled people had a awful experience. Really, many were unable to even enter the stadium, and those that did had a really poor experience in there as well. It was at that point that Joe said, things need to change. We have to make sure this is an experience that isn't replicated again. So those talks with UEFA picked up, and then within the next 2 years, UEFA offered its Monaco Prize, which at the time was an award that they gave out to charitable means. They offered the Monaco Prize to Joyce to establish a cafe at the time. So we received a pot of funding from UEFA then that helped us to set the organisation up and begin to take those learnings and those experiences onto a European scale. As I mentioned, I joined the organisation 2 years after that. And we went straight in then to working into UEFA Euro 2012, which was held in Poland and Ukraine. And we've really gone from strength to strength then. So that was really about showing what can be done at a major tournament. Obviously, for Joyce, there was great parallels to draw between that and Euro 2004. And it really helped to show UEFA, but also partners across the game as well. There's a real appetite for this, and there's a lot to be achieved by embracing accessibility.
Wow. Okay. Nice. And that's what I wanted to kind of like discuss today. Kind of like have a review of accessibility, inclusion, call it whatever you will, in football. Before that, though, I would like to bring in our friends from the UK's Great Campaign because they're also going to share a little bit about the initiatives they're doing to drive positive change through football. And I think it's a wonderful opportunity for all of us to have that conversation around how football can actually be a driver of making a better world. No, so without further ado, let's bring them in.
Great, thank you. It's great to be here. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm really excited to hear what Mike has to say later on in the podcast. So Game Changers is a campaign which the British Embassy in Madrid is running with support from the Great Campaign. And it's about using sport to have a wider conversation about equality, diversity, and inclusion. Because, I mean, sport, it's such a powerful tool to convey important messages. And sport and sports people in particular have an amazing platform that can really show the power of sport for good. So our campaign is particularly focusing on football because that's something that the UK and Spain are equally passionate about. But it's football is more than just a sport. It's a key part of our country's cultural identities and a way of creating connections between people. And it's also important to emphasize that what our sporting heroes do off the pitch matters just as much, if not more, than the goals they score and what they do on it. So, for example, players like Marcus Rashford fighting child poverty, Lucy Bronze supporting mental health, they show us all that it's okay to speak up and to challenge and to be different. And the work that Accessible does to ensure real, genuine accessibility and inclusion in football so that all fans can enjoy the game equally is really amazing. And I look forward to learning more about what they do.
All right, thank you for that. Obviously, that was again inspiring to see how different organizations, institutions are, you know, um, using football to drive positive change. But back to our conversation, Mike. I guess let's start with painting a picture of what accessible football experience looks like. From the perspective of a fan, with disabilities, if you will.
Yeah, so that experience really starts a long time before match day itself. It comes down to the sale of tickets that's done in an inclusive and accessible way to ensure that disabled people have the same opportunities to even just to attend the match alongside their fellow fans. It's really important also to make the point that disabled people often don't get to enjoy the same levels of spontaneity as non-disabled people. And by that, I mean that a non-disabled person can turn up at a train station or an airport and hop onto a service relatively easily. For a disabled person, a lot more planning needs to go into those. So there needs to be assistance booked at the airports or train stations. They need to be sure that the trains or buses or whichever mode of transport actually is accessible and usable for disabled people and can actually get them to the stadium in an accessible, safe, and inclusive way. And also then a lot of points to consider around accommodation. So if a disabled person's going to an away match or an international match, for example, quite often hotels don't hold back their accessible rooms for disabled people, which means that quite often they will show as sold out for a disabled person who cannot then book that room into a place that they need to stay in. It's a huge issue, really, around accommodation because there's so few options for disabled people already. And as I mentioned, more often than not, non-disabled people are just allocated those rooms because they get the first chance to book those tickets and make those journey plans then as well. So it really does help to have a strong level of information out there for disabled people. Um, at the same time as information goes out for non-disabled people. When tickets go on sale, that information needs to be out there by that point, really. So disabled people know that they can actually go to this match and can book the travel and accommodation that they need. But then when it comes to match day itself, as I mentioned, public transport is hugely important. A disabled person needs to know not only can they get to the stadium, but also they can get away from the stadium as well. And you might think that they'd go hand in hand, but when we think of a typical match day experience, that can be a very different experience as well. If you think, for example, a European match in a UEFA competition, midweek will typically end quite late in the evening, which might mean that public transport options are either limited or have already ended for the night. Also, bear in mind that when you go in the stadium, it might be quite light. It's probably going to be quite dark when you leave that stadium, so places look different, especially if you're not familiar with the stadium and surrounding area as well. So that's where directional signage and support from stewards and volunteers plays a huge role as well. But when you're inside that stadium as well, obviously the quality of that experience is absolutely key. So not only do we want to make sure that disabled people can get in those stadiums, but we need to be sure that the stadiums are ready to accommodate them in a really positive way then. So clear sight lines of the pitch obviously is hugely important when you go to a live match. Making sure that disabled people have access to accessible toilets, can buy food and drink inside the stadium. And then just one final point I'd make on that. Obviously, we've touched there on physical infrastructure and also services, but the attitudes of people inside the stadium are absolutely vital as well. Fans, we can't always control the attitudes of, and you would hope that fans would be empathetic and supportive of disabled fans attending matches, and by and large they are, but it only takes one fan with a negative connotation around a disabled person to really negatively impact that disabled person's experience as well and possibly put them off attending future matches. So it's really important that clubs and venues are strong on disability abuse and disability hate inside the stadiums. And likewise, supporting their stewards and their volunteers to work with disabled people in a really positive and understanding way as well, showing real key disability etiquette there so they know how to communicate and how to do it in an effective and understanding way.
Those are great examples, but what I'm actually thinking about and I want the audience to reflect upon is when you go to a match, the different touch points that happen throughout the entire fan journey. And the fan journey is not only when the game begins and when the game ends, it's when I actually am at home starting to plan how I'm going to get to the stadium and everything that I have to do in between. So you mentioned everything around transportation, buying the ticket, everything, just interaction with people, which is key. I fully agree. So I think it's really important for us to think that it's a very, very long fan journey. Think about the different touch points and how that is actually an accessible experience, if you will.
But what one really important point there, as you mentioned, is that the day itself can become really long. If you think of the experiences of teams playing in continental football, so traveling to a different country, it might be the case that the club might put on shuttle buses, for example, to help disabled fans and other fans get to and from the stadium. So again, it's just really important to make sure there that there's a really strong level of awareness that disabled people need clear information and clear access routes along that way. Quite often we do hear about these shuttle buses that may be in operation, but unfortunately are inaccessible for disabled people. And it all adds to the cost of attending a match for a disabled person as well. So obviously the ticket prices, the travel and accommodation, disabled people more often than not have to travel with at least one companion. So you've also got extra travel costs to factor in there, maybe additional hotel costs. If then, for example, the public transport that isn't available for disabled people, it's going to add on to those costs even more if they have to then look into paying for taxis, for example, to get to the stadium.
Yeah. But I guess I'm also wondering, I think one of the things that we need to clarify for people is the concept of accessibility. Because my perception, and this is just a personal opinion, I don't know if you agree, and this is what I want to ask you, is that people understand accessibility as only, call it the physical components of physical access. But I think there's much more to that. So I guess, would you help us understand how to expand or understand what accessibility in its entire scope means?
Yeah, sure. So as you mentioned, the built environment really is key, and it's very very important that physical access to stadiums and surrounding areas are considered. There's also a lot of accessible services and facilities that can be put in place to support disabled people along that way as well. So quite often, if we think of a disabled person, many of us will probably picture an older male who uses a wheelchair, but there's so many differently disabled people out there who have different experiences of that as well and need different levels of support. So, for example, if you take a partially sighted or blind fan, they may not need accessible seating per se inside the stadium, but it's really important to have a service there that supports them in their match day experience. So that could be an audio descriptive commentary that's available for them. If you think of a deaf or hard of hearing supporter, again, they may not necessarily need accessible seating, but they do need sign language interpretation or some way of communicating with people within inside the stadium as well. So there's a lot to bear in mind. We typically break it down into physical access, accessible services, and then disability etiquette then. So people's attitudes and how welcoming they are towards disabled people. And all three, if it's critically important, are addressed with inside a stadium on a match day experience. All three will effectively disable a person in different ways. I tend to find more often than not that it's people's attitudes that really make the difference. So even if a stadium maybe isn't the most accessible in the world, but is manageable, I think if you have stewards and staff inside the stadium who actively go out of their way to support disabled people, that can make all the difference then as well.
That's a huge point. It's all about the people at the end of the day. If we're I always forget the saying, but when there's a will, there's a way. So I think that's kind of like where you're discussing here, and I think that's also something that needs to stand out in terms of what people should pick up from the conversation. And I guess I'm wondering if you had to, if I can ask you to actually, from a scale from 1 to 10, to actually rate, how would you say is, and I know this could be a broad question, but how is the state of accessibility in football on a scale from 1 to 10? How would you put that number to that if you could? And maybe compare it to how was it a few years ago? Has it improved? Has it not improved? Is it still the same?
Yeah, so I think the levels of access can vary massively within a country, even within a particular stadium. The level of access can be completely different between one side of that stadium and the other. So it'd be quite difficult to put a particular number on that, but I can give you an example that goes back to Poland, back in Euro 2012. So as I mentioned, I joined AccessibAll in 2011. And we were starting then to do our preparatory work for UEFA Euro 2012 in Poland and Ukraine. So we developed networks in both countries there of key disability organisations. We met with disabled fans there to really help to understand the level we were at in those countries going into that tournament and how we could then help support and foster wider change in the run up to Euro 2012. And one of the Polish contacts that we spoke with, we sat down with him and said, so how many disabled people are attending matches on a weekly basis in your stadium? Is it 800, 700, 600? And he said, oh, maybe 5 or 6. And we were like, oh, 5 or 600, not too bad. We can work with that. And he said, no, no, no. 5 or 6 people were attending matches and disabled people just didn't know that there was an opportunity there for them. I guess many of the clubs and venues, because they weren't getting that level of demand, weren't really giving it much attention at the time as well. So we really set about then to help to improve those numbers and that level of awareness as well, both amongst the clubs and venues, but also amongst disabled people, to show them that there is a place there inside the stadiums for them. We went into that tournament then, and every single stadium had sold out accessibility seats at every single match. And it's really helped to push on since then. Hundreds and hundreds of disabled people are attending live matches each week in the country now. And as I say, once you offer that opportunity to people just once, it shows that there is a place for them in live football, and it can make a huge impact then. So we've definitely come a long way from those days, and we're seeing great strides taken in countries right across Europe and outside of Europe. There is still much work to be done, but it's definitely come a long, long way from where we were back in those days.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess I'm wondering, looking at the broader picture from Europe, is there like a club or organization or a property that stands out in terms of the efforts that they're doing?
So yeah, I think quite often we find the biggest change that can be made inside a particular stadium is driven by having a real champion of the topic inside that organisation. So we've worked with disability access officers right across Europe, helping to give them training and support and understand the topic better, helping them to liaise with their disabled fans to really understand what will make the biggest impact inside those stadiums as well. It's quite difficult to start naming one stadium without naming a few more, but I can just give the example of Euro 2012 that took place earlier this year in Germany, where it was hugely successful for so many disabled fans who had a real great experience out there in Germany. Again, great strides have been taken tournament by tournament with this, and Euro 2024 really did go above and beyond anything that had happened at a previous European Championships as well. And just one example I can give you, that obviously the number of disabled fans attending matches was significantly higher than it has been previously. But one of the accessible services that we mentioned and that Accessible has great experience in helping to provide at stadiums is audio descriptive commentary. So that's a dedicated service for partially sighted and blind fans that really helps to fill in the blanks, to help them to understand a much fuller picture of what's happening at the match. If you take, for example, a TV or radio commentary, there'll often be gaps in the analysis of what's happening, or they'll start to discuss statistics or things that don't really matter to actually painting that picture of what's happening inside the stadium. An audio descriptive commentary really helps to give that much fuller discussion of what's happening there, so disabled people and listeners can really follow much clearer. So we look at previous tournaments. It's tended to be that the local language has been offered as audio descriptive commentary, and maybe English sometimes as a secondary language for people who don't speak the local language. For Euro 2020, sorry, for Euro 2024, there was a huge change there, and the audio descriptive commentary was offered in almost every language of every participating country, which meant that if you were going to a match between Spain and France, there would be German commentary available, but there'd also be Spanish and French commentary available. And as I say, that was almost every single participating country had that there. So it made an enormous impact for so many partially sighted and blind fans who previously would never have even considered going to a major tournament because that service wouldn't be there for them. It really helps to open doors and make a huge difference going forwards then.
Wow. Amazing, amazing stuff. All right, but I get that. There's and the key there, as you said, is who's the champion inside the organization that's going to push this forward. No, and I know a bunch of people that are are along different clubs, and it's an essential figure within any initiative. No, I guess speaking about because those champions have the vision, but when you speak with other executives, a lot of them actually talk about the challenges. But I truly believe there's opportunity in being and embracing accessibility within football. So are there any unexpected opportunities that come up when, people prioritize accessibility?
Yes, I think it can really help stakeholders within the clubs to understand their stadiums better. Quite often, you only see your stadium and your venue through your own eyes and how you need to interact with it on a daily or weekly basis. When the executives look at the stadium through the experience of a disabled person, I think a lot more of the challenges then come to light, then they can help to understand how things can be made better or even how things might work for them in one way, but other people work in a completely different way as well. It's really important to have that oversight of how your stadium does work on a match day and a non-match day basis. And as we mentioned, so many different disabled people have so many different requirements that one environment needs to support people in many different ways. So I think when you think about the people who are going to be using your stadium on a daily basis, it really does help to put yourself in their shoes really and to understand how that works for them. Good access really does benefit everybody. It's something that we say a lot, but it's completely true. And if you look at how different the population can be, then it really does come to light then. So if you think, for example, a pregnant fan, it will really help them if there are seating areas along a long walkway where they can maybe take a quick break before they continue walking on and have access to toilets and food and drink close to where they're sitting as well. Think about young children attending matches, maybe for the first time. They're really going to be the future of our fan bases going forward. So it's really important that they have the opportunity to see the match properly and create those memories for them. Think about your older fans who might be some of your most loyal supporters, but now maybe don't get about so easily. Don't cast them aside. They may have been watching your club for 50, 60, 70 years. So really important to recognize that loyalty there. And if we're not disabled people ourselves, or close to somebody who may be disabled, the chances are that at some stage in life we will be. More and more people become disabled as we live longer lives and as medical treatment advances. So it is really important to bear that in mind that people become disabled in later life and we're not all born disabled. It's something that could happen to anyone at any time. So very important to bear that in mind when we do look at our stadiums in those eyes, to not only to future proof ourselves, but to make sure that we're doing the right thing here for disabled people today, but also for tomorrow.
Yeah. If you think about it, I mean, every fan counts in the fan experience strategy. And I think what we're trying to get at, in a world where all the football properties are looking into their fan engagement strategy, connecting with fans, personalizing the experience, making it relevant, it's not only through content, it's actually through enabling experiences that everybody can enjoy at a stadium. And it's as simple as that, identifying different segments, different segments of the fan base, and how can you make their experience better? And as long as you get that,
I think ultimately as well, disabled people don't necessarily want to be treated any differently. They want to go to the match and watch the match alongside their their fans, their friends and family. They want an inclusive experience. They just need the opportunity to do that.
exactly, they just want to be, they just want to enjoy the game as anybody else in the stadium with thousands of people there, you know. So it's not a special treatment or anything. It's just, hey, I want to have a good experience. I want to have a good emotions. I want to have good memories of this, and it's all playing into that. No, good. And speaking about experiences, we recently collaborated together, Accessible and World Football Summit in the inclusive match between Atlético Madrid and Lille in the Champions League. So I guess I don't know what's it, can you just recall the experience for us? What was how was your point of view? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so the match in Madrid, it was all about really showing what can be done, what is possible. It's something that maybe not, won't be replicated every single match day going forward, but it really helps to put disability and disabled fans in the spotlight there to show, this can be done on a match day. Why aren't we doing more going forwards? And that applies to the industry as a whole. You often find football doesn't always make the headlines for the best reasons. And if football is in the news headlines, it tends to be that there's a scandal or something's gone wrong. So it's really refreshing to see that there was so much attention given to this match from the major media outlets in Spain and also internationally as well. It really helps to celebrate disabled people and show everything that disabled people can do rather than looking maybe on what disabled people can't do. That match has helped to create memories for hundreds and hundreds of people that will last in a lifetime and has probably shown thousands and thousands of people that there is a place for them within our football stadiums, and this is something that if they want to do it, that there is the opportunity there for them to do that. So the match itself, there was activities outside the stadium, which included football demonstrations in the fan zone, disability football, wheelchair football was taking place there, showing that disabled people can be the players as well as just the fans. There was also educational opportunities in the fan zone, showing areas such as colour blindness and different ways that differently disabled people will interact with sport as a whole. And then disabled people inside the stadium really enjoyed a great barrier-free experience. I know not many Atleti fans will look back on the result too fondly, but a lot of disabled people who were in there that night, I'm sure, will cherish those memories of being inside the stadium alongside their fellow supporters as well. Audio descriptive commentary we touched on was offered for partially sighted and blind fans. And again, that really helps to open doors for blind and partially sighted people that maybe are not always open. One great initiative that the club put in place was the introduction of sensory viewing rooms so that fans with autism or other neurodivergent fans had the opportunity to go and watch the match in a calming and inclusive environment for them and really offer them a place inside the stadium that wasn't going to put them at risk of any possible issues further down the line as well. So again, makes a huge difference for so many fans. I really think that the match itself is going to be a showcase event that we're going to look back on, not just the project partners, but the football industry as a whole will look back on for many years to come as a truly inspirational event. And again, as I said, just to show us what can be done when we really put our minds to it.
Yeah, and I agree, Mike, because this is not about numbers. This is not about how many people. It's just even if you change the life of one person or you make that special day for just one person, that's it. You've won the game, you know? And that's my true feeling on that. And the amount of people, not only, people with disabilities that were able to enjoy the match. What I also liked about this is the reactions that people, without disabilities were seeing everything and they were experiencing the game or the activities and they were like, wow. For example, playing football on a wheelchair, wow, I never realized this was this difficult. Wow, this is just a lot of merit, but it's also fun. So I think at the end of the day, it was opening up, the entire scope of everybody. And I think that what it's all about. We need different football clubs doing this, not because of the numbers, but because if you're able to impact one person, it's more than enough.
Exactly. I think that there is numbers do matter in a way, but at the same time, quality of experience is always going to be paramount to everything that we do. And we could have a stadium where we bring in 10,000 disabled people, but if they've all got a really poor experience, then we've not really achieved anything there. So it's important that stadiums do welcome a significant number of disabled people inside that stadium, but not at the risk of compromising on that quality of experience then as well. It's important that there's a place for every person, but it has to be a positively inclusive place where they can really enjoy the match as well.
Yeah, I agree. And using that context, I want to ask you, imagine that you had 15 minutes, 10, 15 minutes to sit down with a club owner or a board of club owners from a top league, how would you convince them to actually prioritize accessibility in football?
So yeah, I mean, I could sit down with them and discuss the business case for doing this. I mentioned there's over 1 billion disabled people alive today, and disabled people have a higher disposable income than ever before. I could go on at length to them about that. I could speak to them about the legal case, about their own national legislation and building regulations to ensure that they're not leaving themselves open to any legal action on the basis of disability discrimination. But I really find that the moral case is most critical to what we do here to show that it's just the right thing to do. As I mentioned, disabled people make up over 20% of that global population currently. And that's going to keep on growing. More and more people will become disabled as we live longer lives. That's just a fact of life. But that doesn't need to be a negative experience there. And I'd really encourage them to think about the memories that they could create for some of their most loyal and committed fans. Disabled people don't always get it easy in society. Disabled people have to work harder sometimes to achieve what non-disabled people do. To get around, as we mentioned, on public transport can be more difficult for disabled people. So they're really, truly loyal fans who want to love and support your club. So I'd say do it for them. Look at the young disabled fans who maybe haven't been part of a crowd before and haven't had that opportunity to interact with the wider society. Do it for them. Look at the older fans who have become disabled in later life, who may have followed your club for 50, 60, 70 years across your country, across Europe. Do it for them. And then look at the over 1 billion disabled people alive today. Show them there's a place in your stadium for them. Don't exclude them, and welcome a huge, huge market into your stadium, because they will become your most loyal, passionate, dedicated fans.
Yeah, and that's really what it's all about. It's not only. I mean, you said it. There's a business case around it, a legal case around it, but there's also it's the right thing to do. But that it's also probably gonna even have positive effects from a social impact point of view, but also from a business point of view. So at the end of the day, it's a good flywheel to have. And I guess I'm wondering because the industry is not only about football clubs; it's also all the brands and all the stakeholders around it. So, what's the role of brands and organizations and companies in this? I don't know how to call it, but in everything related to accessibility in football.
Yeah, I think if we look, for example, at marketing campaigns around football, and anything to do with football, really, we want our game to be inclusive of society, and we want it to really reflect the society that we do live in. And disabled people do make up a significant percentage of that society as well. So representation of disabled people really is important there. Don't exclude disabled people from these campaigns, from these initiatives. If you're showing a fan base in a campaign, disabled people play a key role in that fan base as well. So don't leave them out. But likewise, don't use them in a way that they become tokenistic then. Disabled people, the same as anybody else, deserve respect and deserve representation of who they are as a fan, not necessarily as a disabled person. Because as you mentioned, disabled people are fans first and foremost. Their disability just happens to be one of their many characteristics, but they can bring so many different diverse skills and abilities to the table as well. So don't demean disabled people in a way that includes them just for the sake of including them, but really actively offer that opportunity and that equal positioning to show true value in their inclusion.
So, Mike, let's dig deeper on this because yeah, we talk about football clubs, we talk about brands, but all of us are the football industry. So, what can the everyday person do? What can the everyday fan do to make football more accessible?
Yeah, so exactly. Football's all about the people within it, and football's all about creating those memories. Whether you're a disabled fan, a non-disabled fan, you want to leave that stadium knowing that regardless of the results, you've had a really good day out there. Quite often, we'll hear stories where disabled people have been subjected to not the best treatment inside the stadium, whether that's having their views blocked by fans standing in front of them, whether that's hearing derogatory or not pleasant words from other fans on the matchday experience. We've all got a duty to play to ensure that everybody feels welcomed inside our stadiums. That's not just disabled fans, that's everybody as a whole. So the message I'd like to get out there to non-disabled fans really is to value and support your disabled fans inside the stadiums as well. don't make them feel unwelcome inside the stadium. They're a part of our fan base as a whole. We're together as one inside that stadium as fans of our clubs. So value them, help them, support them, put a smile on their faces, and play a huge role in creating those memories for disabled fans that really will last a lifetime and really will help to change lives further along the line as well. You don't want to look back on a match day experience as, oh, the result went well and this player played really well, but someone really hurt my feelings or someone blocked me the entire match. Don't be the reason that someone's had a poor day out that potentially might put them off attending future matches, but be the reason that someone smiled today and be the reason that someone wants to come back to that stadium again going forwards.
Oh, I love that. Be the reason someone smiled today. I think I could just end the podcast right here and it would be a perfect ending. Thank you for that. But I guess, I do want to ask a few things, Mike, from you. But that's a very important message. I do want to talk about your summit because it's coming up next week. What can you tell us about it? What are your expectations? What can people expect? Just give us an overview.
Yeah, so the international summit, it's a hugely rewarding time really for all of the team. A lot of work goes into to put this event on, but it's a really unique event that brings together people from right across the football sector, right across the disability sector, and disabled fans as a whole. And we spoke earlier about showcasing disability and putting disabled people in the spotlight, and that's exactly what this event is all about. It's about bringing those experiences that disabled people have had to the forefront so that disabled people don't become an afterthought there. And we show that their fan experiences really do matter. It's an event where we really look to highlight the best practices, the solutions, and the positive experiences that have been taking place right across the game. It also gives a really unique chance to network, to share ideas and give advice. And that's not necessarily just club to club, but disabled fans will get the chance to speak with people from their clubs, from other clubs, from national associations and leagues, even from UEFA and FIFA as well. We'll have stakeholders from right across the game there, showcasing disabled people, and again, really showing what can be done when we put our minds to it and really look to address this topic once and for all. I think with the international summit, we tend to break down the sessions in a few different ways. So we'll look at how things work at the major tournaments and at the club competition finals and give back some of the examples on what was done to improve access and inclusion ahead of those events. We'll take a look forward to major events coming forwards, and that's particularly looking at the Men's World Cup in the US, Canada, and Mexico in 2026. We'll also get the experiences of disabled fans up on stage, sharing what works well for them, how things have been made better for them over the years, but how they want to see things made better going forward as well. And then we'll also have some real personal experience stories in there to really to bring to life what the typical match day experience of a disabled fan is. So it's all well and good talking about those events, but having someone there to actually say, this is what I go through, this is what happens to me. I think that really helps to bring it to life more and show stakeholders across the game, this is why this is so vitally important.
Yeah, I look forward to it. I think it's going to be great. It's going to be inspiring along everything that you guys do. And we're just happy to be able to collaborate with you guys. And I didn't mention the other partners on the inclusive match, but, the ADOAS, Integrated Dreams, Atlético Madrid, of course, for, putting their stadium. But anyway, Mike, this has been inspiring. I'm still thinking about that sentence you said about be the reason that someone smiled today. I don't know if there's any other last words, anything you want to share with the audience. I mean, the floor is yours.
Yeah, so just one more campaign really I'd like to bring out for wider awareness. We'd love to invite all stakeholders to join us in celebrating disability, celebrating inclusion, and again, putting that spotlight on disabled fans. We hold an annual Week of Action campaign, which has been going now since 2013. And our 13th campaign will be taking place in March 2025 between the 7th and 23rd of March. Slightly longer than a week, but it gives the opportunity there for most clubs, hopefully, to have a home match within that period as well. And also going into the international break so we can work with the national associations as well. It's a real wonderful opportunity there to show disabled fans that they truly are valued and that there is a place for them. We've seen some incredible initiatives over the years during the Week of Action campaign, which has included physical infrastructure changes, so opening new accessible seating areas inside the stadium, pre-match ceremonies that might involve disabled fans, and, for example, sign language interpretation of some of the most famous club anthems. So there was a video last year from Celtic in Scotland where they worked with a young deaf school in Glasgow. They recreated the club anthem, which then was played before the match as the players entered the field on all the big screens with all these kids signing along as well and on the pitch. It was one of those moments that really takes your breath away and shows again, how important it is that disabled people really are valued and included in the activities that we do within the sport. So it's a wonderful campaign. It's taken place in over 50 countries to date, and we're always looking to expand the campaign further as well. There is more information on the AccessibAll website, www.accessiball.com. So we'd invite you to check that out and then be in touch with us to let us know how you're going to join us celebrating total access during the Week of Action campaign.
Good stuff. So guys, write that down. I mean, that week of March is going to be a week of action. Start thinking about it, joining. What are you going to do? And let's all create a more accessible football for everyone to enjoy, no? Mike, this has been great. This has been inspiring. It's been informative. It's been everything that I was really hoping for. I want to thank you. I'll see you in a couple of days. And meanwhile, hopefully you have a great day, and we'll definitely have to catch up soon and bring you back soon to see all the progress that you guys are making.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for the opportunity. It's a pleasure. And as I say, we're always open and willing to work with stakeholders right across the game to really address accessibility and access and inclusion. So do approach us if there's anything that we can ever help with. And as you say, looking forward to seeing you in Madrid very soon.
Great. Mike, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And there you have him, Mike Rice from AccessibAll. That was an inspiring conversation. Great takeaways, as always, but let's try to dig deep into them. First idea that I want you to take home is that the entire fan journey has multiple touch points. Think about every single touch point. And this goes back to whenever you're thinking about going to a game, everything that happens between that journey until when you get back home after the game, if that experience is accessible, if people with disabilities are able to enjoy the game or the experience as much as you, and how can you improve that? Another key lesson there, it really is about how people's attitude make the difference. I think that's a key lesson. You can have the best stadium in the world, you can have great facilities, technology, you name it. At the end of the day, it's the people. This is an industry that relies on its people, and this is another great example. Finally, and if you think about it, having that great experience for someone is what's going to build up an overall great fan engagement strategy. We live in an era where everybody talks about personalization. Everybody talks about making it relevant for each individual fan. Have you given it a thought to how to make it relevant and a great experience for a fan with disabilities? Because that's part of your strategy as well. And I think at the end of the day, everybody deserves to have that experience, and you can think about it from, there's a business case behind it. There's a legal case behind it. At the end of the day, it's the right thing to do, but anyway, all of this, at the end of the day, is great. But if there's just one concept that I want you to take home today is what Mike was saying, which I thought was truly inspiring, which is be the reason someone smiles today. How can you do that? It doesn't really take much if you think about it. Just one small gesture will do. But again, go back home and say, what's the reason that I made someone smile today? And with that, I just want to leave you with this episode. Feel free to reach out, as always, on social media. Let us know what you thought. I do hope it inspired you. It did inspire me. And please share it with anybody in the industry that you feel needs to listen to this and will get value out of it. Share it, subscribe, rate the podcast. It helps us a lot. You wouldn't imagine how much. And nothing else from my side, guys. Thank you for tuning into another episode of the World Football Summit podcast, and hopefully we'll see you next time.